Hello, I'm Felicity Cohen. I'm so excited to introduce you to my Wellness Warriors podcast. For over 20 years, I've been a passionate advocate for helping thousands of Australians find solutions to treating obesity and health-related complications through surgical intervention and holistic managed care. My podcast is dedicated to all the people, past, present and future, who have helped shape my journey and continue to inspire me to work consistently to achieve a healthier Australia in both adults and future generations. I hope you enjoy it.
Hi, I'm Andrew Morello, winner of the first Australian Apprentice and Head of Business Development at the Entourage Business Education. We're now 2 years after surgery and a lot's changed obviously over the last 2 years. The last time I updated the community on the surgery and the effects of the surgery, I'd really just begun. Since then, I've now completed the Kokoda Trail in Papua New Guinea. I did that for Indigenous education and raised $286,000. I've got a personal trainer in Melbourne and Sydney, and I'm booked in to do Everest Base Camp April 2nd next year. There's been a massive shift mentally and emotionally, and looking forward to doing more and bigger and better things. So pre-surgery, I would never have dreamt that I would ever have accomplished something of the calibre of Kokoda. For those who don't know, the Kokoda Trail is 142 kilometres through the Papua New Guinean jungle. It's where Australia fought Japan in World War II to defend Australia's sovereignty. A lot of people don't realise the magnitude of it, and there are certain ways you can do it. There's a very slow and relaxed and touristy sort of way. We'd booked to do it in 9 days, but we actually ended up completing it in 7. With my training and the way I live my life, and especially after the surgery, I've always tried to push myself further and further now. So what I obviously did was I did it with people a lot fitter than me, and that's why we ended up doing it in a faster period. But certainly I'm always looking for life challenges now, and 2 years on from the surgery, it's become a life purpose of mine to continue to find bigger and better challenges. Yeah, when I did the Kokoda Trail, it was the whole thing's challenging. So people go, "Oh, what was it like?" And I said it was very, very hard work, and it was very emotional. It was a great metaphor for life because there was beauty and there was moments of joy and beautiful rivers and beautiful water holes to swim in, but then you're sleeping in tents and huts, and then the reality is like you get to a thing called day 4, which is called the wall, and you're basically walking like that. That's the vertical incline of the mountain, and that goes for over a kilometre, and you're halfway up there and you think you can't do it anymore. But the mental stamina that it takes to get through it is phenomenal, and the relationships you forge and the emotions that you go through, it's a great metaphor for life. When I did the Kokoda Trail, I thought about giving up so many times, but the good news is it's very difficult to give up. You're in the middle of nowhere, even to the point that if you injure yourself, to actually get to a point where they can helicopter you out is quite far. So there's only probably 2 points on the whole trail where they can helicopter you out. So if you did have an accident, which a lot of people have, and the deaths and injuries they've had over the years doing the Kokoda Trail has basically been because of that. People have injured themselves 2 days in, they can't get airlifted out for another day and a half, and the injury's been so severe that they've had internal bleeding or something of that nature. So there's always a risk element involved. Obviously, Everest is a big thing now where people are like, you sure you want to go do that? And I'm like, I'd rather, I know it sounds a little bit morbid, but I'd rather, now this new lease on life that I have, I'd rather die doing something amazing and doing a challenge than die on a hospital bed sort of thing. So not that I'm planning on going there and something happening to me, but when I did Kokoda, I went into it full-hearted. I went into it emotionally and mentally and spiritually prepped, and I was ready to take on the challenge, and I'll do the same with Everest. The irony is probably pre-surgery, I've always been interested in Kokoda, but I never probably would have attempted it. Once I had the surgery, actually one of the catalysts for getting the surgery was actually because I wanted to do Kokoda then. So a friend of mine had suggested it, and then I thought this would be a great opportunity to really leverage what I was trying to accomplish with my life from a health point of view, and it gave me a goal. I'm a very goal-orientated, goal-driven person, hence why I'm always booking what's my next thing, what's my next challenge in my philanthropic life, what's my next challenge in my business life, what's my next challenge in my health life. Yeah, so the next adventure with Everest, similar training. So we'll be doing some treks through the Blue Mountains. We'll be doing some treks through the Dandenong Ranges down in Melbourne. Started training, obviously, on a more regular basis. Obviously, the balance of doing it, whilst still trying to work sort of 6 to 7 days a week right now, it's pretty crazy. I've got a lot of speaking events coming up and a lot of corporate opportunities, but always just trying to find time to do exercise in between that and get the most out of it. Post-surgery, obviously the training's been something that I've embraced. So pre-surgery, I was often, I still tried to train. I was training every now and then with friends or playing sports on weekends with friends, but I would probably dread it and try and sometimes make excuses for it. Now I embrace the training and the opportunity to train. Physically, with regard to my knees and my body, probably the biggest change I've seen is recovery. So like if I'd gone and played soccer with mates on a Sunday or played a cricket match during, we have like corporate cricket days on Saturdays with some of the corporate stuff that we do, what you would find is come on the Sunday or the Monday, my recovery now is just phenomenal post the surgery. Like I did a 23.5 kilometre trek 2 weeks ago, and Monday morning, like I did that on the Sunday, and Monday morning I was fine. I find that I get hot, but it's a different kind of hot now. I used to just sweat profusely. Now it's I still probably sweat on my face, but my body sweats a lot less, which means that I feel like I can train a lot longer, and I feel more comfortable training too. So I don't mind doing a two-hour training session. It's something that I feel comfortable still doing. I live a very different life now than I did before. Obviously exercise and adventure and activity is a prime part of it. A good example is I'm speaking at the Inspired Growth Summit at the end of the year, and they always do, the day before, they do like an adventure day, and I've spoken there a number of years in a row, and pre-surgery I would generally try and avoid the activity because it was always something quite exhausting or whatever it might be. Last year I did it. I did the activity. They've got an event on coming up in a couple of months, and I'll do that. I've registered for the activity day, even though I'm one of the speakers. They always ask, do I want to attend the activity day? They do it on the Saturday, then the conference goes Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. And last year it was like a high ropes obstacle course, and if you'd asked me pre-surgery or pre 2-3 years ago if I was going to do that, I would have said no chance. I probably wouldn't have even been able to. At the weight I was carrying, probably from a safety point of view, they might not even let me do it. So, but last year I did it. It was quite difficult. Even though I had lost the weight, it was difficult anyway. A lot of people didn't get through the whole course. I didn't get through the whole course. Ironically, some people that I thought wouldn't get through the whole course, not from a physical point of view, but more from a mental point of view. Mentally, I was happy to do it. But now I'm always looking for that challenge. So even when I looked at it, I went, geez, that's crazy. And a lot of people were like, oh, are you going to do that? And I'm like, yeah, I'll give it a crack. I didn't succeed through the whole circuit, but I got about 70-80% of the way. And then it got to a point where it's really for somebody that was really made for people that were very fit, but it was a little bit of fun, and I pushed myself. And the guy that ran the course, he was a ex-Israeli Special Forces Masood guy, and he's the guy who owns the course, and he's like, I just love seeing people give it a crack. He goes, and that's, if you go back 2 years ago, I would have opted out for the whole day, let alone not done the course. So I've always had a very extremely busy business career. Obviously, I do corporate speaking. I've got a executive role at the Entourage. I still do some consulting back with the Yellow Brick Road team and the Yellow Brick Road franchises. So trying to balance all that is difficult at times. But what I've felt is since the surgery, I've got more of a capability of dealing with anxiety and stress. Not that I suffered from necessarily anxiety as an anxious person, but rather obviously the stress of business sometimes creeps up on you and gives you some difficult periods. Yeah, pre-surgery, there were many times that I wanted to, like a prime example was at one stage I wanted to skydive now and I bungee jump now, but at one stage I was too heavy to skydive. There's weight restrictions when you tandem skydive. I was too heavy to bungee jump at one stage. I was too heavy to go on some of the roller coasters through Europe and so forth, and some of the fun parks. I didn't, there's restrictions on that, so I did miss out on some of those things. That was pretty heartbreaking, especially when you've travelled a long way or everyone else is doing it, and you get there and they tell you can't do it. But now I don't have that problem anymore. Like I took a helicopter to the Port Polo the other week and in January, and the irony is, like, now when you get onto a helicopter, like you have to give them all your weight, and now you give them the weight and you've got no issues with giving them the weight. They're like, oh, that's great. No, like, it's not even a thing that they have to think about anymore. It's ironic because when people say no, that when I carried that weight, when people would say no, it would often come out of left field. So like you, even though it had happened a number of times, I'd become so complacent with my weight issue that I probably never really thought that it was going to be an issue anymore. Like I was at peace with it, and that's probably one of the curses. One of the things I've spoken about with Felicity before is that men have this amazing ability to become complacent with their weight management, because we don't have necessarily. It's changing. Their culture is changing, but if you look on Instagram, it's a lot of there's all female imagery, women on the front of magazines. Everything's about beauty. With a lot of men, we become complacent with it, and we get away with it. That's probably one of the biggest challenges and a lot of men realise they need to do something about it, whether it's surgery or take action on their weight management. When it's too late, when they get sick or when they've got something wrong with them later on in their life. And I always tell people it's a lot harder to recover, or not harder, but a longer recovery period, where when I had the surgery, and now the surgery's even gotten even more efficient since I had it, but when I got it done, most people, Felicity said most people take a week or two to recover. I was up and about within a couple of days. And I was young, I was in my late 20s, so I was 29 when I got it done. And so I recovered literally in a couple of days, and I was up and about. I didn't fly for a week, but then I was back at work pretty much the following week with no issues. So the older you get, the longer you probably should leave yourself for recovery. But that's why I tell people there's, more is lost with indecision than wrong decision, and there's no day like today to make that decision, to make change. And it's becoming more and more common, like that more and more people decide to go down that route of being indecisive, and it's to their detriment, So I've had a lot of friends now that I've encouraged to have conversations with WLSA, and I said it's just a conversation. It doesn't cost you anything to have a conversation. It doesn't cost you anything to just do your research. And then I've had a great result since, but some of them do come back to me. Some of them are asking, what is it that I could, like, are you sure I should do it? What were your results like? And I said to them, look, Google me. You can see the old photos of me and what I was like, and just. You can see all the things I've accomplished since, and just make that decision and run with it, and make that mental decision too, and the spiritual and that emotional decision. And once you do that, then the rest, that they'll sort out the logistics of it. I think for me, I was a victim of complacency, so I don't think, obviously the cost wasn't an issue for me. It was more the fact that I was very, very lucky in my world, because I was very confident. I had attention from in my life, it was females, so that's who I wanted attention from. I had attention from females. I had a sphere of people around me that always boosted my confidence. So my weight was not an issue with my confidence, and then hence I'd become complacent. I think as a general male understanding is that a lot of men, the reason why they take a long time to make that decision is because they say, I'm just going to focus on making money right now, because they're like, if I make lots of money, I'll be fine. Then later on, once I've made my money, I've got time then to work on my health, and time then to work on my family, and time then to work on my fitness, and time then to live a better lifestyle. But what they don't realise is if they make the decision earlier and complement everything else they're doing, they've got a better chance of 2xing or 3xing or 4xing their business and also their personal life. For me personally, I was aware that I had a weight issue, But the problem was, and as I mentioned before, a lot of men don't really do anything about it until they get sick. And I still don't get sick, like it's there's the flu going around with everyone right now, and a number of people in my office got the flu, and they go to me, oh, hey, have you been feeling unwell? When they texted me and said, I'm not well, I got the flu, how are you feeling? I said, I feel great, right? But even when I carried the weight, I never got sick, and when I did work with the psychologist with WISA, is that we actually worked on the fact that the reason, probably one of the big catalysts that Andrew Morello never really did anything about it is because I didn't have cholesterol, I didn't have high blood pressure, I didn't have diabetes. In saying that, I was young still, so you would hope I didn't have these things, but if you were my weight and probably 40 or 50, I probably would have had all of those things, and that would have been like a catalyst straight away to do it. But I think denial is a big thing for a lot of people, and then I think it's the component of, what do I actually need to do? Like what's involved in doing it? It's actually not that arduous, and not anymore either. Like I was probably, now they've got a new procedure from when I did it, and it's even less invasive and less intrusive and faster recovery. So you've really got no excuse right now. So I had a lot of inconveniences being a larger guy. Like some of probably the two main ones were probably, especially being in the business world, was getting clothes that fitted me. That was a big challenge, and not being able to just walk into a Rhodes and Beckett and pick a shirt off the shelf and be able to grab that. So that was an issue, and it was definitely a catalyst, but it was definitely an issue. And there were days where you felt bad, like especially when you'd go shopping, like with my girlfriend at the time. Like you'd go shopping and she was 50 kilos and little skinny thing, and never had a problem with her weight in her life. So we'd go shopping, she'd pick something out for me, or she'd go on her own and go shopping, pick something out for me and bring it home, and even though it was like an XXL, it still wouldn't fit, or it'd fit but it'd be tight fitting, and I wouldn't wear it, and she's like, why aren't you wearing the shirt I got you? So that was obviously quite an emotional journey for me. Probably the other big thing was when I used to travel, I traveled 100 flights a year, I used to always need the extension piece, when I would sit in and I used to shun and worry about getting on a plane and where I was going to be sitting, and if there was the chance of getting, I would always ask, if I sit at the back, could I get a spare seat next to me so I'd have a little bit more room? And I always know that I'd need the extension piece, so I'd have to ask for it, and you'd be asking for it in front of other people, and you'd feel a little bit embarrassed. Like I got used to it, but I was definitely feeling embarrassed about it. I think I chose the right time to do it. Like, of course, the earlier you do it, the better. But I probably didn't have enough catalyst at that time from a pushback of things that I wasn't able to do. But the big catalyst for me was when I sat down with a friend, and she's like, "You're going to make all this money, but you're not going to live long enough to spend it." And that was a big thing for me. I think that was a big mindset shift for me, because, as people say, you've got this great confidence. You always had it with your weight, without your weight. So you're not probably a prime candidate of someone who's got that self-consciousness and is worried about the way that they look, or got the health. I didn't have the health issues. But when I had that conversation with that friend, and she goes, "You're going to make all this money, but then you're going to die at 50 years old if you don't make a change or do something about it." And that really hit home and was really had a lot of gravitas for me. As I've talked about in the past, was the fact that come from a European family. It's not exclusive to European family. My mum was, and it's a job in itself, but a housewife. Her version of love was just cooking. Like us as boys would come home from going out or come home after school. A lot of my place was sort of the hangout place for all of my mates after school. My mum would literally sometimes cook for 10, 15, 20 people, and it was just big pots of pasta and lots of bread and traditional stuff that probably there wasn't a great balance of all the food groups effectively. The second probably big issue I had was the fact that I was working a lot, and when you get off a plane at sort of 10:30 at night, I was getting into a hotel and ordering food in a hotel. So I was eating quite late, which everyone knows is a terrible thing for you to do. Basically, you go to sleep, eat a big meal, And back then, pre-surgery, I would probably sometimes order 2 meals. You'd order like a pasta and or an entree and a main and bread. So like, you eat this big meal in your hotel room at 11 o'clock at night, then go to sleep and then get up at 5 in the morning. And because you're always on the go, you're always eating probably unhealthy food, very quick things that you could just grab and packeted food, or you'd be like filling up the rental car at the petrol station next to the airport when you were dropping the rental car off, and you'd grab snacks because you thought, the next time I'm going to get a chance to actually sit down and have a meal isn't until 11 o'clock tonight. And then obviously there became a bad relationship with bad food. And then, post-surgery, once you start getting some results, you want to continue those results. And it really is a tool. And I tell people that because if you go back to your old ways of life, yes, the surgery stops you from overeating, but if you go back to drinking Coca-Cola or sugary drinks or eating chocolate all the time or eating packeted food, well, it's kind of pointless. You're still getting the wrong foods into you. So now I make a conscious decision on what I'm going to eat, and I make the most of it. So a prime example was like this morning I had scrambled eggs, but I took the bread off the bottom and just ate the scrambled eggs, and that was enough to make me feel fulfilled. And you can still eat great food. Like that was a tasty meal this morning, but now I'll make a conscious decision to eat healthier snacks, sultanas. I pre-pack stuff. I do a bit of food prep. I'm lucky and advantageous about the fact that I've got someone who I've got assistants and executive assistants and a team around me and people that help in the household too. So, I don't have an excuse really, but it's all about making better decisions and changing your mindset and go, okay, I'm going to make a more conscious decision to eat better because I don't want to miss out on the results that I could possibly get from the surgery. I don't feel like I've missed out on anything. Obviously, I grew up in a very corporate culture where we'd go for the Friday afternoon steak and you'd have like a big massive steak and a couple of bottles of wine and things of that nature, but I can still have a little bit of steak. There hasn't been anything that I can't eat anymore. And like, you're allowed to have a little, like, it's not like you can't eat chocolate anymore, but it's instead of eating a whole chocolate bar, you might have one little piece of a chocolate bar, or instead of, the fun thing I do now, and I've talked about this before, is I generally get other people to order the food, and then I try a little bit of everyone's food, just like a forkful or a slice of everyone's food. And it's quite fun for me. I've gamified it and found joy in it. So rather than it being, okay, I'm ordering a Wagyu beef steak, and that's the meal I get. Now I go to people, you order the steak, or someone orders the seafood, and someone orders the pasta, and I have a forkful of pasta, I have a little cut off of their steak, and it's become a bit of a fun thing. I'm not embarrassed to tell people that I had the surgery. I'm quite proud of it. It's obviously it was something that got results, and it's allowed me to live a more fulfilled and more successful life. So I've been able to have a bit of fun with it, and that's the big question a lot of people ask me. They go, what did you have to give up completely? And I'm like, not really anything. Like, there's certain things that probably I don't enjoy eating as much anymore. So some of the things so now, like, I can't eat a lot of meat. If I do eat a lot of meat, I feel a little bit overfull, but I can still eat meat. So like, if anyone's watching this and goes, oh, I'm not going to get it done because I love eating steak, you can still have your steak, but I'm vigilant now that if I have some steak, that it's got to be a little bit of steak, And the other thing I've had a bit of fun doing is I graze now too. So what happens is, I think even from a metabolism point of view, it's better for me, and it seems to work well for me, the way I'll have a little bit of food and then I'll have another little bit maybe 3 or 4 hours later, and another little bit 3 or 4 hours later. And that grazing actually gives my body a better chance of metabolizing the food anyway. So what I did before I had the surgery, I actually consciously chose to start eating less food and eating better foods. So I wanted to train myself. So that way, when I had the surgery, it was only going to be a tool to, encourage results and to accelerate results. And as a lot of people have seen my story, I've probably had some phenomenal results in a very short period, more than a lot of people, because I feel like I'd made the mindset shift earlier before I even had the surgery, and I got myself into that rhythm and that momentum, so that way once I'd had the surgery, I was already making better decisions. I was always a large child, and then a large teenager, and then a large young adult. I did have a period at sort of 18 where I made a big shift, and I was training morning at 5 a.m, every morning at 5 a.m. with my girlfriend at the time, and then we would train every night at sort of 6, 7 o'clock. So we'd do a proper training session every morning. We'd go and do a river walk pretty much every night, the second night, and I was making very conscious decisions with my food, and I did get results. I did. So like I've definitely yo-yoed with my weight over the years. I've always been a large person, an overweight and obese person. But what it was there was a period, and if you go through my Facebook and my from back in the day, you know, my first sort of post many years ago when Facebook first came out, there was a period where I was probably the weight I am now, or even slightly lighter even. But it was a lot of work, and it was unsustainable. And then obviously what would happen is I would get stressed out with work, and work would get busy again, and then I wouldn't train for a month or two, then I'd start eating wrong foods, and then I'd put weight back on, and then, you know, my girlfriend at the time would be like, let's get back on track. So we got back on track, and then I'd lose weight again. And it was this whole process and this cycle that was never long lasting. It was like little, you know, spurts of opportunity and times. And then, you know, so I wanted something that was going to last forever. I'm probably not the best example, because I was in high school quite popular because I used to run youth events, and we were the only all-boys school amongst 7 all-girls school. It was all-girls schools where I went to school. So it was, you know, being a St. Bernard's boy, you know, we called it being a Bernard's boy, that's what it was. It was a great school to go to, 1,800 boys. I was vice captain of the school. You know, I was involved in everything. But there was certainly an element of bullying. And obviously I just thought that was just normal. You know, now in hindsight, it's not normal. And now that there's a lot of education around men's mental health and young boys' mental health and high school bullying and things of that nature. So now if you look back upon it, you'd say that bullying would have been unacceptable. And probably if I didn't have such a great support group and a great network and a loving family, I may not have been someone who would have dealt with it as well as I did. But there was definitely kids that were large kids at school that got bullied and didn't have the thick skin and didn't have the friendship groups or the attention of girls or the attention of boys, whatever it is that you might have. And that's what got me through, you know, like that's what was my little to get through. So like, but you could see that mentally it did take its toll on some people. And I, being a bigger guy too, would just tell them, oh, you know, brush it off and don't worry about it. They're just boys being boys. And there was a culture of that too. Like even though it was only, you know, I was in high school only 15, 20 years ago, like we're not talking 1950s here, there was a culture where at an all-boys school where, like now it's unacceptable, they wouldn't allow that, but at an all-boys school, like if teachers heard boys picking on other boys, or even I'm sure there's girls picking on other girls, but especially at a boys' school, it's like, just get over it, you're a boy, you know, get over it sort of. And that was sort of the advice that sometimes either a teacher or an adult or even I've heard parents say that to their kids before, just get over it, you know, build a thick skin or build a bridge and get over it. But you're like, well, maybe they don't have the capability of doing that, you know, maybe they don't have the luxury of being able to do that. And who knows the trauma that they're going to carry around with that. And I think a lot of weight gain is based on the trauma that they go through because of their weight. So like they're larger in themselves, and then they get picked on, and then they emotionally eat, or they, you know, become hermits, or they don't get active, or they don't go and join it in school sports or join a gym or anything because they don't want people to look. So then it just makes the bad situation even worse, which I think that's a big catalyst as well. So I think one of the issues that I was faced with was the fact that I got a lot of attention in high school. So you know, I was popular amongst the boys, I was popular, you know, amongst girls. So like I always had attention from, you know, girls wanting to be with me. I was the, you know, vice captain of the school. So what happened was that it fostered an environment where nobody ever really held me accountable to my weight problem. And I didn't really see it as a problem. It's shifted a lot in Australia now. Like, don't forget, I was at school, you know, 15, 16, 17, 18 years ago, right? So like now there's a lot more education going on, and I even see, I sit on the board at my old primary school, on the board of my high school, and now like in the canteen, there's all healthy choices, all the lunches now, you know, when I went to school, the things that were at the menu were on the menu were hot dogs, sausage rolls, meat pies. They were your only options. Now there are a lot of more healthier options. There's a lot more education going into it. So there was definitely a lack of education around, good eating, go back, 15, 20 years ago in schools. The last part is that there was, a culture where it was okay because if you weren't getting bullied, probably the kids that realised they needed to make some change were the ones that were getting bullied, and I wasn't getting bullied, or I was getting bullied in a more jovial sense, which I brushed it off as just boys being boys, but I think that's the reality and the challenge, especially with men. I think if a girl goes through high school and she's overweight, she gets out of high school and she wants to do something about it. I did want to do something about it, so I got to 18, I put on weight all the way through and nobody brought it up with me. Then I did have a girlfriend at 18 and she was quite fit, she was into her fitness. So she got me into fitness. And then once I got started, and like now that I've made the lifestyle change, I enjoy it, and I was enjoying it and I was doing it with somebody. And that's where if people do look at, weight management solutions, they should, it's great to do, to make sure you've got your husband or your wife or your life partner or a friend or someone to support you and get you on the journey, because that encourages you, someone to take you for walks and stay on the path and stay on the journey and eat the right foods and things of that nature. So you don't want to be in a relationship where you've gone and made this change in your life, but your wife or your husband or your life partner is eating junk food every day, or the fridges are stocked with bad food. So it needs to be a family decision to some respects, but it's a positive family decision. It's not like you're asking people to really give up on anything too major. And I'm not saying they can't enjoy themselves. They can still enjoy themselves or have an ice cream or have dessert or whatever it is, but just obviously being conscious of the fact that if you're going to go make this decision to make this change in your life, then you might as well make it and make it properly. So there's probably a few different ways that the conversations come up with friends and strangers too. I'm pretty open about it. So some people like to keep it discreet and they don't like to talk about it, or they might be a little bit embarrassed about it. That's fine if they don't want to talk about it. No one has to know that you've had the surgery. You just eat less food, right? But I'm pretty open about it. I'm a big advocate for it, and obviously I try and have the conversation. I'm open with having the conversation. People are intrigued by it, and I think it's becoming a lot more socially acceptable, and there's a lot more education around it now, and things like this where people can log online and they can watch interviews and understand what it is that someone's gone through. It's always difficult to bring up the conversation if you think somebody else should get it done. I can probably bring it up a lot better because I've gotten the results. I think it would be hard for someone to bring it up with somebody if they'd never been overweight themselves. But because I was so overweight and then I lost the weight, some people have gone, oh, how did you do it? And now that there's a lot of education and understanding of what some of these procedures are and what options are out there, people do ask questions, and I'm just very honest with them, and I tell them the truth, and I tell them I got great results from it. It's not for everybody, but there's no harm in making the inquiry. It's a little bit like people's financial position. A lot of people approach me and they go, I'm thinking about buying this house, and I go, well, there's no harm in you going to have a look at it, or I'm not ready to buy a house, but I want to buy a house. So I go to them, well, why don't you start going to some open for inspections? Oh, but I've only saved half a deposit. It doesn't mean you can't go for an open for inspection, you can't go to an auction. You can go to those things and see those things. That's the best way to educate yourself so you can make a better decision and an educated decision on whether this is the right thing for you. I feel like the best approach when having a conversation with somebody is it needs to come from heart. Obviously do it discreetly. So the people I've had the conversation with, I've had a great success rate with them making the inquiry at a minimum. So I've talked to them about what I did and the results I got. I show them me doing Kokoda and I show them the before photos, and they're like, oh wow, it's like you got some big results. And I'm like, yeah, and you should look into it. Like it's not for everybody, but you should look into it. The reality is it probably is for everybody. That's the truth, right? So the scenario is that it's going to change their life. And I'm like, it's a bit of short-term, it's not even pain, but a short-term, it's one step back to take 3 steps forward. And they're like, what's the process and so forth. And I said, there's no harm in going to go check out the process and understand more about the process. if you wanted to approach someone, obviously, probably the tips with doing that would be obviously to do it one-on-one and in a private surroundings. And number two, just make it from heart. Like, don't go overboard. And but if it's your wife or your husband, it's a pretty easy conversation to have, because you could say, so a lot of men would say it wouldn't be an easy conversation with my wife, but I would say it is, by saying that you're my wife and I'm your husband, or you're my husband and I'm your wife, and I want you to be with me for the rest of your life, and if we don't make change now, we're going to get to 50, 55, you're going to have things like diabetes, type 2 diabetes, you're going to have things like cancers, my mum's got Alzheimer's now, like it's, Alzheimer's and dementia. I think they know that obesity and being overweight can accelerate that process too. So like the reality is that, if it's from heart, and I think if it's discreet, then you shouldn't feel bad about having the conversation. And obviously go into it, with a delicate manner and understanding what, the other person might be in denial or defensive about it. So don't push the envelope, but certainly be open to having that conversation. I'd recommend if you're somebody who's overweight and you're living a more reclusive life, that, probably 3 quick things you can do is, first of all, get out there and just start getting involved in social aspects and social environments. Number 2 is, a great thing to do now is get involved in social sports. A lot of guys that are overweight, there's mixed sports like men's and women's netball, mixed sports in Sydney CBD now. They have big soccer teams that they play at lunchtimes. There's touch footy that are mixed. So like, that's a great way of maybe starting to try and get healthy, but at the same time also meeting, women or meeting guys or whatever it is that you might be interested in. And last but not least is, be prepared to just go and have the conversation. Like, there's no harm in going up and having a chat with somebody, and if that chat then turns into a date, and then that date turns into a relationship, and that relationship turns into a marriage, then great. But there's no harm in having the conversation. I have a little formula, which is, I was taught by one of my first coaches when I was 16, 17, for having a conversation with people. And it works with everything, business, it works. I'm not gonna lie, I make a joke when I talk from stage about it, that it's made me a lot of money and it's introduced me to a lot of girls. I make a little bit of a joke and everyone laughs and they think it's funny like that. And I say to them, it can be used for anything, building rapport. And it's called the Ford formula, so F-O-R-D. Everyone loves to talk about their family, their occupation, their recreation, and their dreams. And it's a very simple formula that I've always used. And people are like, well, what am I going to go talk to that person about? And I'm like, well, the first thing you can talk to them about is like, where did you grow up? And what school did you go to? And it's a great way of asking people, like, oh, are you married? Do you have kids? And they go, no. Do you have a partner? Then all of a sudden, okay, if you're interested in this person, that you can pursue potentially that route. I'm not saying if they do have a partner or a husband or a wife or kids, you should not continue the conversation. But then obviously you talk about, where do you work? I work at PwC, and often I would say to, you'd say to people, my mate, when I was trying to give him advice, it was like, he met this girl and I said, ask him ask her where she works, and she said where she works. She worked in the MLC building. I said, well, just find out what the cafe is called downstairs, and then why don't you ask her to take her to lunch tomorrow when you see her, to take her to lunch at the bottom of the MLC building. So it's pretty simple stuff, right? So recreation, obviously, what do you like doing on weekends? People go, I love going to Bondi, or I like going to, I play a sport. You go, well, actually, I enjoy that as well. Or if you live near Bondi, why don't we go for a walk along the beach? Like, it's pretty easy. Like, it's a great little formula. And then the last one is a little bit deeper. And obviously, if you feel like you're creating a bond and a connection with somebody, is you ask them about their dreams and use those words. The irony is that we, on average, dream 72 times a night, but we only remember 1 or 2 of them. But everyone's dreaming about something. So you can ask them about that. I always had a lot of energy, but certainly one of the big side effects of after the surgery is you've got more energy, your libido goes up. Obviously, you do get attention from whoever it is that you're looking for attention from. That's something you probably should be vigilant of, because if you've never had attention of, girls or guys or whatever it is prior, and then you do, that's something mentally you need to prepare yourself for. Like, all of a sudden your confidence goes up, your charisma goes up, you're able to have more conversations with people. So that attention is something you need to prepare yourself for. But one of the great side effects of it is obviously your energy level goes up, your libido goes up, and your sex drive goes up. So there's a triple bogey win there for you. So it's, you know, there's no real reason why you wouldn't take advantage of that, and especially if you're in a loving relationship with your partner. You know, I speak to some people that have been married 20 years and they don't make love anymore, and you're like, well, why don't you make love? And they've lost that attraction in their partner. So, you know, it's a great reason to go out there and refine that attraction and redevelop that love again. So probably the funniest moment was we were in I go to Cambodia every year to visit and do orphanage work over there with Sunrise Village, Cambodia. And what we do is we take a group of entrepreneurs. So like this year we've got like 40 entrepreneurs coming. Last year I think we had like 27, and we went to a place called Chinookville last year, which is like a beachfront area. We stayed along there and we did some work out in the villages there. And one night we're all sitting there like in front of, we're talking 20, 30 entrepreneurs, and I would never have done this when I was when I was overweight. And I said as a joke, like someone's like, we're going to go skinny dipping, and no one would do it. And I said as a joke, if someone gives me puts another $1,000 towards the orphanage, the charity Sunrise, I'll do a nudie run into the water. And I did it. I did it, yeah. So they donated. I think someone's got it on video. I see that they weren't allowed. Oh, you saw that video, yeah. The good news was it was pretty dark, but the people that were there definitely saw me. So it's something I would never have done prior to losing all that weight. I definitely wouldn't have. I would have felt self-conscious about doing that, but it was fun. It was, you know, the guy that said he was going to donate the money donated the money. I think a couple of guys ended up donating the money because they thought it was so funny after that. But that's probably been the funniest one that I've had, you know. And then I think just the general shift in me, like I you know, when people see me like that I haven't seen for a couple of years, they see you now, they freak out. Like somebody came up to me the other day when I was in Adelaide for you know, tragic circumstances. And somebody came up to me and they're like, we weren't sure if it was actually you. Like they basically walked straight past me, and that's been some funny moments there. I'm like, Peter, and they're like, Morello? And I'm like, yeah. They're like, oh my God, like, what happened? And then I tell them the story, and I tell them about, you know, I had the operation, I made change, I did the Kokoda Trail, I did Mount Kinabalu, I'm doing Everest, and like, my God, you've changed completely. This is amazing. And I'm like, it is amazing. It truly is a miracle. So a couple of funny moments that I've had. One, I put all my old clothes out the front of my house at Bondi after I had the surgery, because it was all my big suits that were really big on me. And I put them out the front and basically saying to people, take them for free, but everyone walking past would lift them up and go, they'd put it on them, and it was this big, so it was like definitely not going to fit them, number one. Number two, my rings come off now, so like I've always got to be careful because I've lost weight on my hands too. My rings have started to come off, and I've had some of these rings since I was a kid, so they've started to come off. I went up a belt notches, but I didn't realise that you could adjust the belt connection. So I got a knife out and I was making holes in it so I could make it, you know, wear a tighter belt. And I took it to the guy at the shoe fixing store, and he's like, mate, all you have to do is come here, and all we do is we take it off from this end and we reattach, so you don't have to break it, you don't have to ruin anything. So I've ruined a couple of belts over the years from going up belt sizes as well. And then now I have to worry about a thing like my pants actually falling down. So like if I'm rushing to get somewhere, I've got to tighten my belt so that way I can quickly run to the plane, or my hands are full with suitcases and things. I'm like, oh, wait a minute, I've got to pull up my pants quickly because they're actually slipping off, and you've got to keep buying clothes. It's a good problem to have. One of the problems I've had is I've had to keep buying clothes. You got to, every couple of months, you got to buy a new set of clothes. So I say to people, probably lose all your weight before you buy expensive clothes, or lose as much weight as you can before you buy expensive clothes. Because once you do, you're stuck with that one. So it's a prime example was I got a tailor-made suit made from Oscar Hunt, and they made the suit, and it takes 6 weeks before you get it. And then I got to, they measured me up. I got there, and he's like, the suit's too big for you. We've got to send it back again and get more alterations made because it was too big in the 6-week period. So, but it's a good problem to have. Yes, you can do the Kokoda Trail. Yes, you can summit Mount Kinabalu in Borneo. Yes, you can do Everest Base Camp. Yes, you can do anything that you want to do. But most of all, yes, you can go up to a girl if you see her and you like her.
Thank you for joining the Wellness Warriors podcast. It's been a pleasure to have you online with us. If you've enjoyed the series, please leave your review, subscribe and follow, and we look forward to sharing many more stories with you in the future.